Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode number 129 of the Peak of Serenity podcast. Getting up there. Seems like a couple weeks ago we were at one.
Exactly.
Um, but I am, as always, one of your hosts, emallson, and joining me we have my co-host, Anomoly.
Hello.
And this week, Dragonflight had effectively a design freeze. They're done on talent design. Done.
Okay. It's either a good thing or a bad thing, depending
It,
on your class.
yeah, and spec, and it's some of
Oh,
it.
yes.
There's a lot of like tuning left, so that's what they're focusing on now. They're like, okay, these things are now like mostly fixed in place. It's all just tuning now. There's little bits of design that can go into tuning, right? Like
hmm
something going from hitting 3 targets to 5 targets is tuning, but it really can have a pretty big impact on how things play. But we're going to talk a lot more about that in a bit. Before that, Anam, how was raid this week?
Dude, faded. Love the new faded raids. Love the double affixes. Love trying to figure out which one's optional, which one's real. No, it wasn't bad. We did basically killed everything but Sylvanas. So had a we did to this week was our like getting close to pre-patch. Probably want people want the achievement for killing all the mythic bosses. So like let's
Yeah.
get those kills under our belts.
So let's get Fate
Um
Scribe down, is what you're saying.
let's get Fate Scribe and Painsmith down, really. Funnily enough, Painsmith was like legitimately like reprog for us.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, like we still have probably like well, not a ton, but probably like 3 to 4 people who just never did SOD.
Yeah.
So it's was fun learning with them about how to do phase 3. And we spent a lot of I think Pains was this week was like kicks and motes. So there was like a lot of people like padding motes. Not padding motes, but like
We,
focusing too much on motes and like
yeah.
not doing mechanics. So
Yeah. We actually turned off motes, not because of that, but because of frame rate issues. When we were trying to do the motes, like we would in phase two wait for the first set of balls, then we would grip the motes in, click them, and start doing the motes. Problem with that is that there's a spike wave coming. So if you have
right.
3 FPS because the motes are out, you can't cross the spike wave, or at least
Yes.
your odds of success are very low.
Exactly. So we spent, gosh, probably a solid like 2.5 hours, reprogressing Painsmith, which was kind of rough, I feel like. And then yeah, actually to be fair, like 4-shot Fate Scribe. Fate Scribe wasn't the issue. I think we actually spent more time on Kel'Thuzad than we did on Fate Scribe for us.
Yeah.
But to be fair, Fate Scribe was never, I don't know, we always like for whatever reason, our guild gets Fate Scribe in a way that like doesn't get Painsmith. And so yeah, we had like
Yeah.
yeah, like maybe 4 wipes to Fate Scribe and was wasn't too bad. So
So, um, we spent looks like about 2 hours on Painsmith,
okay.
which is
Not
high
too bad.
for us. Like everybody that was in has done it before, so
Mhm.
nobody's learning the stuff. There was the moat experiments for the first few polls, right? And
Yeah.
then just like uh some like taunt shenanigans that went wrong, and some people
Nice.
eating spikes, some double traps getting blown up, traps in melee, always fun. Just
Yeah.
no one singular thing. A lot of it, I mean, did come down to people eating spikes, right? Like that's
Yeah.
always how Painsmith is. A lot of it comes down to people eating spikes. And then it took us like 30-40 minutes to get Fate Scribe, which we
Okay.
did do for
That's
the
not too
first
bad.
time this season, this week.
Yeah.
Um, and some of that was actually me. I'm playing DPS on it, so I have never done runes on Mythic. And on Heroic, they're like really easy to stand on them.
Yeah.
On Mythic, if you go and stand on them, you die to this stupid beam mechanic. And
Well, I mean, you
so,
gotta stand to the
so
outside of
that's what
them.
I'm saying. He's like, you have to stand on
Yeah.
the edge. So I was
Yeah.
like really being very respectful of the beam's personal space,
Yeah.
and
Yeah. Yeah.
like, so we wiped a couple of times to me like not quite being enough on it to consistently have it move forward rate that you
Gotcha.
need to do. Like it's a combination of like if I had had runes that didn't have to move as far, it would have been fine.
Right. Right.
But I
Right.
had ones that had to go like almost the whole way around.
The full distance. Yeah.
Yeah. and then I was still figuring out like how to not die to the beams. So I never died to the beams. I actually don't think I got hit by them at all. Um,
Nice.
but we did wipe twice because I like was doing it and I was being a little bit too close to the edge, and just as you go around, just like being off of it by just enough to have it stop. And then when
Gotcha.
you miss
Yeah.
the thing by like 3 seconds, that's what counts.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Those are. I mean, we didn't. We went to maybe once or twice to people not understanding how to do it. We also had like the issue too is like again with new people, like we're just like, hey, get the weak aura. The weak aura tells you where to stand and you're fine. But like the way we set it up is like anybody that was new, we put in the backup list. So like
Yeah,
sometimes like the way that I don't know if that weak aura works is like it calls backup, but then it gives you a like after a couple seconds it changes to like an icon because that's the person you would effectively back up if they died.
yeah,
And like so they were like one person like ran and stood on the rune and started making it go the opposite way. I think like one of the first pulls and like what are you doing? They're like, oh, it changed. I thought like the person they were backing up
yeah.
died, so it was telling me to like run over to it. And they
We
were like,
do
no,
we
it's
do
not how it works.
manual backup calls.
Okay, yeah. Well, that's I mean to be fair, that's what we do normally.
Okay,
It's just the weaker we have automatically sets a backup. It's not we never
yeah,
generally use it. It's more of just like
yeah,
if you don't get assigned one, you're just a backup and just run there
yeah,
whenever call that you're running and run there. So
yeah,
um yeah, that was a couple stupid wipes to that, and then a couple people forgetting that you can't enter a rune from the center of the room. So if they spawn
yeah,
on like the far side of the boss, you can't just like
yeah,
run straight through it. You have to like come in from the side.
yeah.
So, but no,
Eh,
it was I mean, Prague was Prague. It reminded me of the oh, okay. So one thing we did screw this up. I'll tell you. So
okay,
uh, if you end up killing Painsmith, but do not trigger the skip,
you can't turn on
you
the skip.
have you
Yeah,
can't turn on the skip.
yeah,
Yeah. So we learned that this week. Like
yeah.
30 years into this tier being something that's a thing. Yeah, we learned that this week.
We
So,
were gonna go like knock out Kel'Thuzad before we did Fate Scribe, but
uh-huh.
ran into that because you're like, oh, we didn't turn it on when we killed the Terror, so now we have to actually kill Fate Scribe first.
Yeah.
And then um, actually one shot Kel'Thuzad, which was
What?
crazy.
Nice.
That boss does not. We one shot Kel'Thuzad, and the icing on the cake, our kick assignment weak horror for the intermission wasn't working because we didn't. Nobody had auto marking on. I'm the one that has auto marking on,
Oh.
and I was not in.
Nice.
So
Nice.
kicks were just like completely YOLO, and
That's amazing.
it
That's amazing.
worked. People got it.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so that was that was fun.
That's so good.
I'm quite happy this week. Uh I've been I'm playing mage this season. I've been working on my damage. Started off real low.
Uh-huh.
Last week I didn't. I finally stopped feeling like I was a carry kind of damage level. This week
Yeah.
like significantly higher. Like I've got so
Nice.
obviously there's motes. I have orange parses on 2 bosses now, and they're moat bosses. So like,
Hey,
but
I mean, look,
if you look at
you're just
it,
doing the good thing.
but you look at like Fate Scribe, like I put it in the time to do the prep to figure out, okay, here's like Mage has a bunch of different cooldown reduction options, to figuring out
Yeah.
which of those I needed to run to have question up for every motes and then also the final bird. So I was like number 1 or number 2 damage on motes. Actually, no, I was number 3 on motes. We have 2 demo lock
Yeah.
on motes. No contest.
Yeah.
Um and like number 5 damage for the burn at the end on the boss.
Oh, nice. There we
So
go.
I like my overall boss damage is not that good because you just like push the boss really fast. So by the time I'm
Yeah.
done doing modes, it's like, okay, kill the ads and get ready to go into the intermission.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
That's awesome though.
yeah. And my other non-mote parses are at least not gray. They're
Well,
purple,
that's
blue,
good.
sometimes green, but they are not gray.
That is awesome. That is awesome. Yeah, I don't know. I haven't looked at my parses lately. Although healer
It's a
parses are like
complete
whatever.
mess. It is a
Yeah.
complete mess. Like I have 1 kill on Remnant of Ner'zhul. My damage
Mhm.
is 31.5k. I'm pretty sure if I go and I look at it, like 40 to 50% of my damage is to motes. It's
Nice.
yeah, yeah. I beat the other 2 mages on our kill purely because I did more mote damage.
Okay, okay.
Like we have one that did 23k, but it was all boss damage. Meanwhile, I'm at 31k and it's half boss damage. So I'm like doing 8k less boss DPS than them and just like murdering the motes.
That's hilarious. That's hilarious.
So
Yeah, no. That's not I'm glad you're feeling comfortable. That's awesome. That is nice. Um, well, cool. Well, I guess we can sort of continue on our faded discussion and talk a little bit about what Blizzard did this week to one of the worst faded affixes,
the worst.
Creation Spark.
Yeah.
They went through and did a pass on a bunch of different debuffs, particularly in Sanctum and Sepulcher, and basically removed them from being affected by Creation Spark. So, I mean, the big one that was, I think that they didn't really mention. I think this had already been hotfixed before, but like the biggest one was like Jailer bombs, ticking
Yeah.
quicker, was always an issue. But yeah, so they basically went through, um, did the whitelisting or basically exempted all of these debuffs that sort of are out there on most bosses from doing anything quicker based on creation spark being on the player. So um good on them for making the change. We actually hit the malevolence thing, I think the last time we did,
Yeah, we
or
did. We did
was it the
too.
last time faded, which is
Yeah.
like annoying on remnant of it popping early. So but
And
no, this is just 6 weeks in, finally getting it is great timing. Whole Blizzard.
there's a few of these that are like sneaky that you wouldn't have expected to get affected by it. Like
Yeah.
the Painsmith weapons. The way they work is he does like a cast and you have a debuff. Um, and the like time moves faster for you think was making the weapon faster. And like it makes you move faster too, but these things are not the same.
Yeah, yeah,
It did make it harder because you just had less time in reality, like in real world time, you had less of it to get yourself in position, and you have to be very precise with it. If you are taking one of those weapons and you are not exactly inside one of the squares, you will die to your own weapon because
right.
it will give you like a 500% increased physical damage taken buff, and then you'll get hit by spikes and they will kill you through like you're dead.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
and then just like the list on Sylvanas is hilariously long.
Yeah,
It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 debuffs on Sylvanas.
it's just crazy, and I wonder too if it's just like they're just like they don't actually know if these things were affected or not. It's just like they're just putting the tag on all these abilities and just
Yeah.
telling us and being like, we don't know if this actually changes anything or not, but we're just gonna throw it all out
There's a
there.
lot of it
So
that I think is like more minor. Like most of these ones on Sylvanas aren't actually that important. The one that matters is there's Veil of Darkness and then like uh the one for the arrow. But
yeah,
the others and the one for the arrow, I don't even think because she still had to cast it, so I don't think it did it. It was just like visual. Anyway,
yeah,
um, the main thing I think is that a lot of these are pretty significant dots on players, and if the dots are ticking faster, like let's imagine the scenario where you are a DPS that has a dot and got the spark, and then your healers did not catch the spark. You're dying 55% faster, and your healers are not healing you 55% faster. They're healing you at the same like normal rate.
right, yeah.
So even in cases where like it's just a dot, there's some danger there from that effects.
Exactly, exactly, yeah. So I mean, it's good on Blizzard for I guess finally making the change, but I mean, it's now what we knew about this like the first week with Lahuvim, I think being like the biggest offender.
Yeah,
And they've now finally made the change, this much into it. So
yeah,
um in any event, good on them. What is Sepulcher is faded next week, right? So
yep,
that'll be fun.
yep.
Um we'll see. And I guess one other change they did make, not raid related, but in Gambit, Cecilia's Gambit, the first boss, they added a extra action button to both pick up and drop the colored orbs. So which is really nice. I mean, it's nice to be able to just like hit a button instead of having to click on your screen. And really is probably a huge help more for like the like accessibility options, right? Versus you know, a normal like, typical player probably doesn't even see the difference here, but if you have trouble like hitting specific keys or like moving the mouse in specific areas, this is like a huge help. Just being able to hit a key um, to pick up and drop the orb. Um, so cool. Other than that, I don't think there's anything else, at least hot fix wise on the retail side.
Yeah,
Um, so cool. So I did want to bring up one, still sort of in the last week, but I want to bring up one thing. And I know that this isn't a Wrath of the Lich King podcast, right? We sort of focus
despite
on
your
retail.
AV
Des-
adventures.
Despite my AV adventures and my just general love for this expansion, I'll say. I did want to touch on one actually interesting thing. So they're in a huge media blitz this week. If you guys aren't aware, if you're familiar with Wrath, a bunch of developer interviews went up. Um, as they will. Like the launch is on global launch on Tuesday, very similar to last WoW expansion 2, like Shadowlands. Um, and one thing that came up as a part of all this was actually an interesting system that they're introducing in Wrath, which I wanted to sort of talk a little bit about here and maybe how it could maybe see some play in retail, if at all. So what they're adding as an idea is, or I guess to give you a little bit of background, is um, Classic works in terms of phases where they do content phases. So we already know how they opened this stuff up, 10, 12 years ago. Actually longer than that for Wrath. So we already know how to
10
open
years
it up.
ago
So
was
it's
Mists.
yeah, no, 10 years ago was missed. It's even like 12 or whatever it is. It's a long time ago. And so they do content releases in phases. So phase one is like the first set of raids. Phase two will be like Old War, I'm sorry, raids and things like that. Um, and in the original game, like you just sort of progress your way through that content from start to finish, right? And the once you hit phase two in this case, or Old-War, like dungeons are sort of not no longer useful really. Like maybe you get some bad stuff from it, but in general you don't do them. So what they're changing in terms of a catch-up mechanic, which is interesting, is they're adding in heroic dungeons, and they're also changing, or adding heroic plus dungeons, and they're changing the way that loot drops in the game. So what they're doing is once phase two starts, meaning like once Old-War is released, they're basically changing the loot structure in the previous set of raids and also within heroic themselves. So like the way that it works is like 10-man raids, so like 10-man knacks will now drop 25-man level gear, 25 knacks level gear. So they're moving that down. And then um 10-man knacks gear will drop in these new heroic plus dungeons. So you'll be able to essentially catch up gearing wise by doing these heroic plus dungeons, which just seem like harder versions of the original
It's
heroics,
the
right?
same way that like in retail they scale up the Mythic Zero difficulty every season. It's just
Exactly.
that,
Yeah.
but they're not adding new affixes or anything like that. It's just like the numbers get bigger.
Well, and it's slightly different in that the gear, it's not that they scale the gear, it's that
Right, that's
the
true.
10-man gear actually drops from 5-man heroic
Right.
plus dungeons, which is
Yeah.
the thing that I thought about with retail. So here's my point. Is like I actually think this is an interesting change. I don't know if it's good or bad, right? It makes catching up in smaller group content easier to get you into like if you want to do
Yeah.
25-man Old War, it's your guild can quickly help you catch up. They don't want you
Yeah.
to do like a full carry. But I wanted to ask the question of like in retail right now, we have this system sort of like we have
Sort
that
of.
scaling system with like mythic zeros becoming hard or dropping higher item level gear over the course of expansions. Each
Yeah.
season, like the mythic plus system raises to whatever the new, raid item level tiers are. The problem though is you're just farming the same gear over and over again. And so the
Yes.
question is like, would it be interesting or would it be something that would be cool is if Blizzard took previous tier items and made them drop at like a lower item, like higher item level than their original drops, but lower than the current content, like in 5-mans, right? As sort of like a way to catch up, like particularly tier sets, I think, right?
Yeah.
Like, what if tier sets now drop from like Mythic Plus, like directly
I
from
think
the previous tier? Sorry.
so. I think um most things it doesn't matter. I think tier sets, which I also don't matter if you get a creation catalyst kind of thing, and
Mhm.
then trinkets are like the big ones, and the other things like it doesn't. really matter if your haste first cloak came from a key or from a raid. Is still the same
Right.
thing. Um, Trinkets could be interesting. Like there's this big thing that was frustrating for people trying to play tanks in season 3 of Shadowlands, where if you really like the trinkets you really wanted were both from season 2. You wanted
Hmm.
Aegis from the 9, and you wanted the Fate Scribe Cheat Death trinket. Those were like the tank trinkets that you wanted. Um, and people like you're not going to go and kill Mythic Fate Scribe
Yeah.
in during 9.2. Like nobody's doing that. You could get the 9. People did go and do the 9. Um, but you were not getting Fate Scribe
Yeah.
trinket. So stuff like that, like taking the old tier trinkets and being like, hey, these are some like unique trinkets that you know we could carry forward, and throwing them in the dungeon loot pool could be interesting. Um,
Hmm.
I don't like. I think that the bigger thing for me, so this is to me trying to figure out a way to fit the season to season catch up that retail has into the classic model without it feeling like the real one. Like so, the
Right.
very noteworthy thing to me is actually, so like right now in retail, if you want to catch up in gear from season to season, you go and you do the normal or LFR difficulty of the new raid,
Right.
and you do the one above that and the one above that. Um, in classic, the answer that they're doing is, well, if you want to like get something new geared up for Ulduar, you go and you run 10-man Nax, which
Right.
feels a lot more like the classic model of like continuing to run the old raids. So, like, kind of counter question for you: what would you think of that if, like, in order to gear up for heroic Sanctum, you needed to go and do Castle Nathria?
I think I'd be fine with that. Like me personally, like being a person who just generally enjoys raiding more than other content, like I'm fine with that.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, I mean, I think that would be cool. But I understand that that sort of breaks the need for Mythic Plus, right? Because like that is like Mythic
does it
Plus
though?
is
Because Mythic Plus is still
actually,
spammable.
yeah, that's true. That's true. But I
Like,
guess like the question would become is like, and this is where you get to like there's too much like my point of view that there's too much gear in retail is that like would the items from the previous tier of rating be better than what you could pull from Mythic Plus? Because like that's the reason you would go back is you'd want to there would need to be like a distinction of like okay I'm doing old content to gear well I mean does there need to be though sorry thinking live on this and just posed a
yeah,
question it's like does the raid become your alternate gearing strategy?
right.
I guess
Like,
the
so like the idea would be,
yeah.
Castle Nathria would get changed to have heroic drop mythic eye level, normal drop heroic eye level, and
Mhm.
LFR drop normal eye level. So then to gear up for, I don't know what that would do to Sanctum eye level, but like to gear up for Sanctum, what you would do is you would run heroic Nathria,
Right.
and that would give you gear that is 226. That is the same eye level as original Sanctum normal gear. So then you would go from Nathria heroic into Sanctum heroic.
Mhm.
The weird thing that that does is then it's like, well, for people that are um like heroic raiders, that means that then rerunning. I guess maybe this is not a bad thing or necessarily a good thing, just a different thing. They're incentivized to go and run heroic Nathria again for the
Right.
226 gear until they're like they've got all of their 226 plus Sanctum gear.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think it would, yeah, I mean, I think yeah. I think it would be a cool system, but I think that on retail, at least, it breaks with the introduction of spammable Mythic Plus,
Yeah,
right? Because, like, there's like, at that point, then you'd only be doing the raids for, like, in your case, like, a unique item, like a trinket or
yeah,
a weapon or,
yeah.
tier sets, right? Like,
It
the other gear you could just get from Mythic Plus, and
yeah,
you wouldn't care if it's crit mastery versus well, you might care about mastery, but you wouldn't care if it's like these two stats where like your best stats are these two. It's just the greater item level is just
yeah.
good to equip, right?
There's like I think two things that are interesting about it. One is it makes the old raids relevant for longer, which is a
Right. Yeah.
I think I think a lot of the patches would be more enjoyable if I like start an alt and there's two raids for me to do instead of one.
Exactly. Yeah.
Because it's never worth doing like in Sanctum. It was never worth doing Nathria in any difficulty for.
Right.
The second thing that it does is that if you are in a good clear group for a raid, it is more efficient in terms of loot drops than Mythic Plus
Yeah.
is.
Yeah.
So like if you can't spend all that time spamming keys, it would be better to do Nathria if you had a good group. But
Right.
where keys are like very consistent and like it takes, 20 to 30 minutes to do a key with a pug. The heroic raid, you could spend an hour and a half and get nothing, or you could spend 10 minutes and get down.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that's true. I guess yeah, the community aspect around it would probably have to change a little bit from retail, because like that's like the community in like class. Just in like, I haven't actually done any raids on classic, but
Uh,
yeah, it
Na-
was
Nax notably, extremely easy raid.
yeah. Well, they buffed it, so
No,
hopefully
it's
hopefully it's a
extremely
little.
easy.
That's true. Actually, it's gonna be pretty easy.
They buffed
Well,
the
we'll
health
see.
by like 35%. They didn't actually
Yeah.
add any mechanics, so like I did all of the tank requirements for these bosses
Yeah.
for Warcraft logs, and there's a bunch of them that just like anything. They do things, but it's like you just like sit there and get punched in the face a bunch while like one mechanic happens. Like there's a dispel mechanic that has to be done, and there's some ads that spawn. But the
Yeah.
ads don't actually have to be killed or tanked, and the dispels don't actually kill you if they don't get done correctly. They just like do a bunch of damage, so your healers have to heal through it. So
Yeah.
it's yeah.
Effectively, yeah. Yeah. That's funny. Yeah, but I mean, I guess I guess we'll see. I mean, I think you bring up a good point that like it would be interesting to make old raids relevant. I think that's always been like a maybe something that I've tried to say is that like there's so much old content that Blizzard
Yeah,
just doesn't do anything with. Like
yeah,
the Mage Tower coming back was good, and other stuff like that. That even like Legion Time Walking, or like Legion, no, was it? Yeah, it was Legion Mythic Plus, right?
yeah.
Or Time Walking Mythic Plus, which is cool little thing. So
The
I think
season
it's
4 dungeon change, like bringing in old dungeons,
yeah,
was great. And even like I have my complaints about the season 4 raid structure, but having like multiple raids that you can go and do is cool. It sucks that it's like you have to do this one this week, and maybe you don't want to do that one because it doesn't drop amount, or maybe you want to go
yeah.
back in and like go and do finish what you started on killing off an end boss and then go and do the other raid. Having it be the strict weekly structure kind of sucks, but um, yeah,
It's not, but it's not. To me, that the weekly structure, yeah, isn't the greatest, but it's also not the worst. So
yeah,
like, it only being like a 3 week rotation is fine. But yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I think this sort of like final season cycle is cool. It just would be it would be nice if like in actual progression there was like maybe something else to do with old content, right? I
yeah,
just don't know what that is.
yeah. I
So
mean, it would be great if now that they've worked out all of the kinks in their scaling stuff, and I talked about this podcast. Um,
yeah,
if like in patch 10.0.5, once we're done with progression of Vault of the Incarnates, um, we get Nighthold or Battle of
yeah,
Dazar'alor or Ny'alotha. Like effectively faded,
no,
but please just leave out the affixes. Just like scale it up. I don't give
yeah.
me affixes.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that would be it would be an interesting like end of Prague. I feel like yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I do it in the middle, like something like that in the middle, because like there is that then sort of pressure on particularly guilds who aren't as progressed to like now have to do two things, right? Versus just focus on one. But it would be nice, like end of the expansion, like continue the season for
Yeah,
tradition of like, hey, get this weird buff thing and go crush some old
yeah.
content, right?
But I mean, it could also be like it's half like 3 eye levels, 6 eye levels above the
Yeah.
intro level stuff from Vault, which we talked about the eye level stuff last week.
Yeah, getting scaling or yeah.
There's like the early stuff is 3 eye level, like first two bosses are 3 eye levels below the next two bosses, which are 3 eye levels below the next two bosses, which are get levels below the final two bosses, right?
Right.
Um, so they could like in like just like throw Emerald Nightmare in there, and it can be like, okay, you're extending on the final boss. Here's some like extra loot that you can just go and clear like the first four bosses of Emerald Nightmare and get like eye level just like 6 levels higher loot
Yeah.
and use that. You don't have to full clear the instance, but you can still get something valuable from like going and spending an hour knocking out, Nithendra and Ursoc and Dragons of Night.
Yeah. 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 I'd like to. Yeah. I mean, I'm definitely a fan of it. It would just depend on how, like, we'll say mandatory in
Yeah,
quotation marks, like
yeah,
it would be end up being, right?
yeah.
Um,
I think that's a
but
big concern.
yeah, it's because once it's deemed mandatory, then it's like it pulls you away from doing the current content, which like Blizzard's always been very weird about. Of like
Yeah,
their tradition has been like move forward, never backwards. So
yeah,
anytime they bring backward stuff in, it's like they just want to make sure it's not mandatory that you do it. I think is the
yeah,
thing. Oh,
yeah,
um, well, cool. Well, I did want to touch on one interesting thing that final topic, final sort of news story, I guess you could say, before we jump into it. But one interesting thing coming out of Dragonflight beta, which is an update to Invokers. So if you remember, Invoker was launched as or sort of touted as a sort of mid-range class, and all of their abilities are roughly about 25 yards. They have some longer ones, some shorter ones, but generally their range is about 25 yards. As a healer, that's terrible.
yeah.
We've already like as and
Also,
specifically as a Mistweaver.
bad as a DPS too.
Yeah, it's true. But as a Mistweaver specifically, we've already gone through this with Essence Font. So the original incarnation of Essence Font had a 25-yard range
God,
around you.
yeah,
So it was bad. Like that was bad. They eventually upped it. I think it's 30 now. And so they're still not great, but it's better. And so like when the Invoker came out with the 25-yard range, one of the first thing I thought of was like they have to change this. Like
yeah.
eventually they will get to the point
I
with this
mean,
class where they'll
that's
change it.
all of the healers in my guild were like, we're not going to be running an evoker if their range is 25 yards. It's just not going to.
Yeah,
Like,
you're in some
it's going to be
weird
like
no man's land.
worse than the Resto Shaman thing, where like Resto Shaman has a lot of value from people being stacked in your healing rain, and like you get a bunch of value then from your like Cloudburst totem and stuff. It's got like
Yeah.
everybody stacked kind of value. The Evoker doesn't really have. And also, Resto Shaman can still heal you. Like, they can still Riptide you from 40 yards away. You,
Exactly.
there's not, like, they're not as good if everybody's a million miles away. But they can
Yeah.
still heal.
Yeah, it's not bad. So Blizzard posted this week that they are upping basically all healing invokers, so preservation invokers, healing and utility spells to be 30 yards baseline, which I think is a great change. Like the issue that it always becomes is at 25 yards, you basically sit in a weird position. Like Monk, at least with 25 yards on Essence Font, was fine because you're in melee anyway as a
Yeah,
Mistweaver. So like the 25 yards covers all of melee, maybe some front folks in the range group, and then you'll be able to hit tanks right
yeah,
with it. So it's not a big deal. And Volker 25 yards, you are literally standing in between the range camp and the melee camp in no man's land just so you can reach the tanks.
yeah. If you
And at
can
which point
even
then you're
reach the tanks. Like, on a
yeah,
boss with a big hitbox, like, the tanks might be 10 yards away from the melee. And
yeah.
then,
Or like Halandris,
yeah,
like hello, like how do you heal a boss like that? Like any
yeah,
sort of
you
spread
can't.
boss? Yeah, it's rough. So they did make this change. I thought it was just funny to bring up because they literally also did this exact thing to Essence Font with monks, and like that was just one spell
Yeah,
versus every spell that you had.
yeah.
And I was like, this is not
Uh,
great. 30 yards still isn't great, but it's better. So
Mark my words, there will be a ranged buff for Devastation Evoker before 10.4
it's
or
true.
in 10.1. They will bump the range. I don't know if it'll be 30 yards or 40 yards or 35 or whatever, but
Hmm.
if it's not a melee and it also can't play in ranged, then it doesn't have a great home right now in terms of like raid positioning. Like
Yeah.
it's gonna just have to play in melee, but like baiting range mechanics into melee is gonna be a problem.
Yep. No, that's true. That's true. So yeah, so that is the invoker corner of the conversation, I think. So we'll see if they extend this to any other abilities, but yeah, could have told you this Blizzard like 6 months ago when you announced this class that was going to be bad.
Yeah.
Um So cool. I guess a couple then. So as we move into sort of the topic, I think the main topic today was sort of when you mentioned it was like the whole design locked thing, and there was a couple things I wanted to talk about before we get there, just around like the game getting Dragonflight getting closer and closer to some like release level candidate, right? So first up is they finally dropped the new login screen. So when you log in, if you actually, so I don't actually look at this screen ever. Like I never see the login screen
It,
anymore because I just click the launcher and it goes.
you see this for like a brief moment while it connects you.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's so fast that you just like see a black screen and it goes to your character select, right?
Right. Right. Right.
But
Uh,
yeah,
but you can see it. So they have the new login screen. It looks really cool. I don't know if it's animated or not,
it
but
is.
it's a very oh, it is? Okay, nice. I'll have to actually check it out in game.
Yeah,
But no, I mean, not, to be fair, nothing ever comes close. Like as bad as Cataclysm was in an expansion, their login screen, the best one. With
was
like
that
Deathwing,
Deathwing
that's
flying
Deathwing
in?
like on top of Stormwind, like where he like lands
Yeah,
on Stormwind and like roars. Like that's just and actually to be fair,
um,
Wrath isn't bad too, with Syndragosa
yeah.
flying,
I,
swooping in
I'm
and
waiting
roaring.
for them to like sneak Murazond in here or something,
That's
and
true.
like somebody's gonna fly in and just like strafe. There's a so the people that are listening. Login screen is Valdrakken up on the mountains, um, and all the clouds and the water running down and everything. It looks great. Um,
Hmm.
I'm waiting for like some dragon like strafing Valdrakken. Like we're gonna get like a Miss Pandaria style like mid patch that destroys the main city, and the login screen's gonna change.
Nice, nice.
That's
Yeah,
my
that'd be
prediction.
pretty cool. That would be pretty cool, like a changing login screen. Yeah, I like that idea. But in any event, login screen's in. So we're getting closer to a real release.
Yeah,
The other thing that sort of popped up that hasn't been announced, but there was a change to the creation catalyst UI. So Wowhead picked this up, but they changed a bunch of the art around the creation catalyst, basically seemingly updating it to Dragonflight type art. It's a little bit more brown, less blue, new icon for the actual like UI window itself, which I thought was interesting. So I mean, this was definitely asked to Ian, but I think a couple of times. I think the Wowhead article references like a Taliesin interview, but I know that I think Max might have asked him about this too. Um, so it looks like Creation Catalyst potentially being talked about coming back. Maybe not for season one, but at some point. I I don't know if I like this. I'll be completely honest with you. Like, I get like for me, I'm probably in the minority camp of like why I don't like this, and I think we've talked about this
yeah,
ad nauseum about
yeah,
like the too much gear in the game, having to not work for it, but like there needing to be that friction between like getting an item and not getting an item, and like I get the people that like this because they're like, I went 6 weeks, never got tier set, and Creation Catalyst got me all 4 tier piece. Now I have 4 piece, I'm happy, and I'm like, yeah, well, it's your one experience. This just speeds it up for everybody. So, in any event, Creation Catalyst probably back, potentially back
yeah,
in Dragonflight. I don't think it's gonna. I mean, honestly, probably one of the most liked system,
yeah,
not most liked, but at least like I think other than the timing of it, people generally like Creation Catalyst. Like most
yeah,
people's issues with it was like it should have been sooner,
yeah,
not it was a bad for the game. So,
yeah. And I mean,
um,
I if so, if they had not, well, I guess there's two things. If they had not locked away the last two bosses or the last two tier bosses of Sepulcher, the way they did, or if they had not tuned Sepulcher so damn high, the
yeah,
release timing of Catalyst would probably have been fine because you would have been able to just like kill the end two tier bosses twice a week, every week on normal and heroic,
right,
and get your final your four set that way. But it was not possible to practically kill those in a pug for a long. Like Regalon was absolutely a monster. Anduin was a monster in pugs too. Like
yeah,
getting through those in a pug is in early Sepulcher was a miracle.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. So I'd agree there. Like I think timing wise, I think it's either timing or just the structure of the raid. They do that sort of time gating your 4 piece.
yeah.
I think if they don't do that, I think it ends up being a little bit better. But
The other thing is
um,
like if four piece felt mandatory for like very early bosses in the raid, in Mythic.
Yeah, that's true.
Like not having 4-piece on early bosses felt really bad. Whereas if it's tuned more like the early bosses of Sanctum, where they were obviously not tuned for you to have your domination set. It didn't feel
True.
as
Yeah.
bad to not have it. Like it still sucked to have it, but it wasn't like I am an active detriment. It kind of feels bad. It was like I could be doing better, kind of.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, and that's sort of the balance I think they have to strike with this stuff. But no, in general, I mean, like Creation Catalyst, I guess is fine in terms of if they want a system to help you catch up, not catch up, but help you like
This is
protect yourself from bad luck,
yeah,
basically, right?
yeah. Bad luck
Um,
protection for
yeah, for your foresight, yeah. Which is, I mean, which is, I guess it's just like coins almost. It's just a different sort of flavor, right, of
yeah.
coin. Um, the old coin system. So, but yeah, looks like it's potentially coming back. Did some UI updates to it. We'll see if it's a season one thing or maybe they hold it for some of the later seasons and see how season one goes. So, all right. Well, I guess two other big pieces of news that sort of again I think start to get into that design freeze topic. So, before we talk about like some of the class changes and the actual design freeze piece that they mentioned, Blizzard did release this week their raid release schedule, or raid testing schedule. I'm sorry. So
Yes.
they have for the next 3 weeks. Is it? I think. Yeah, it's the next like 3 Thursdays and Fridays basically. Except for October 6th, that Thursday, there's no testing. But every other Thursday and Friday for the next 3 weeks, they're testing some sort of bosses, with either normal or LFR being tested over the weekend.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, so looks like, tons of like what, 2 heroic bosses this Thursday coming up, 3 on Friday, plus next weekend is all of normal mode being opened up
Yeah.
for the full weekend, which I think will be fun to get into.
All of
Um,
except for the final boss. They're doing the thing again where
yeah.
like the final boss is not being tested. It's only the last one, not like the last was for Sepulcher.
Okay.
But this is also a shorter raid. It's 8 bosses.
Yeah, it's much shorter. Getting some early WAD raid
Mm,
vibes from it. I like the opening. I don't know. For me, well, it's sorry. Let's get through this because I don't want to talk about maybe boss numbers later. But no, this, I mean, this is sort of, I think, a indication of like the fact that all right, now they have to actually start to tune this stuff, right? Like
yeah.
I think a lot of people are like, if they don't start raid testing shortly, the end of the year timeline doesn't make sense, right?
Yeah.
Um, and so at this point, starting it now with what people are saying is an end of November type release of this, they basically have 8 weeks to test these bosses and do the
Yeah.
classing around them and get the rest of the bugs just out in the world fixed up. So
And this is going to
it's
be like
tight, but
raid testing is where like they see how good their spreadsheets are, figuring out how much damage stuff is going to do. It's like
right,
if we
yeah,
go into this raid testing, I mean, the first heroic bosses are going to be absolutely wild. We're going to have classes that are going to do literally 50% of the damage of
yeah,
other classes. Um,
be great.
and that's just like they're gonna. Some of that is going to be like the ones that are up there are going to get brought down, and some of them are the low ones are going to get brought up. But this is where they actually get like really actionable data for how classes perform.
Yeah, yeah, and this is, I think, where at least from like a theory crafting perspective, the game starts to become, I think, a little bit more exciting, right? Like, there's a bunch of like pre-work you can do and a bunch of thought stuff, and like at least for like the Mistweaver community, a lot of work's been thought about, like for our like natural REM spreading abilities and like the
Yeah,
Misty Peaks, the rapid
yeah,
diffusions, and what we think. And now we actually get to put in practice. Okay, I think this will be good because we'll have a bunch of renewing mists out. Will we actually, as we go through this testing,
yeah,
or will like some of the bugs we've noticed be, or some of the interactions, I guess should say, not really bugs, be more impactful than we think, or less impactful too. I
yeah.
guess that's the other side of it.
That also brings us kind of one of the things that connects to this design freeze.
Yep.
They are not going to be making. Let me actually pull up the announcement. I don't want to misquote this. Um, so the exact wording on this is. So I'm not gonna read the whole thing, but basically they said with the next beta slash PTR build, we are transitioning away We're spending the majority of our time on the design iteration of the new talent trees, and we are now primarily focused on fixing bugs and tuning the game. This includes balancing talent choices against each other and tuning the throughput of each class. So basically, I wouldn't expect any more like serious like redesigns in the way that like Boomkin recently got a pretty substantial redesign to their tree.
Hmm.
Um, Instead, there's going to be a lot more of like uh, talents getting tuned up and down. I would not be surprised to see more talents, kind of like more links added and removed to the talent trees, like that kind of thing, making things easier or harder to access at the same time. I think that probably falls under the like tuning
Right.
like umbrella. But then the other thing is bug fixing, which like there's a lot of very buggy, broken talents. Right now, people are memeing about prop paladins because on beta they are just like the best thing ever because they have a bug and every time you press judgment, your bubble cooldown gets reset.
Oh yeah, I heard
So
about this. Yeah.
you play that and you play the thing that taunts everything when you press bubble, and you're literally like immune to everything, and everything is always focused on you all the time, which is
Yeah.
obviously not how that is supposed to work.
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, that's I think their biggest focus now is just not seeing huge design things. So like I think in terms of like the particularly like the monk trees, right? I don't think any of the specs have any issue with this, right? I don't know if
Not the like
from
broken, overpowered. Okay, Brewmaster has one. The renamed, they renamed and reskinned the Mechanicos uh
Mhm.
power, the like cooldown reduction one. Um, and it's broken. It
Oh
triggers on
really?
like every hit of Chi Wave and stuff like that. I don't know what's wrong with it. It triggers far, far, far too much. So you see people like posting a screenshot from a beta dungeon and it did like 90% of their damage because it just
Yeah.
triggered off of everything. So there's that.
Yeah, but
But
I so my comment was more on just like the general structure, right? Like
yeah,
we're not like I can tell you Mistweaver is not maybe Holy Paladin where like they still have like a huge issue with parts of their trees. Like even priests for a lesser extent, right, have gone through a couple of redesigns. I don't know what they think about their latest redesign, but um at least in general, I'll say like from a Mistweaver perspective, happy with the way the tree turned out.
yeah,
Um we'll see how
yeah.
the tuning goes, yeah.
There's there's a lot of tuning that needs to happen with your. I will say, because there's a lot of things where like if the numbers don't work out, it's just not interesting. Play the same thing all the time, and that same thing is the Charred Passions build all of the time.
Yeah.
And whether you take rank 2 invoke Niazao just depends on what level of content you're doing, but you either always take it or you never take it. Um,
Interesting. Interesting.
but there's definitely stuff like there's the whole blackout combo section of the tree that currently is tuned to the level that you play it over Charred Passions. But it could be. It could absolutely be.
Uh-huh.
And um, if that gets brought up, then you know, then there's actual like interesting choices.
Yeah.
Bone Dusper is
Yeah, no.
unfortunately still in the tree though.
That's fair. No, I mean it's yeah, it'll be interesting. Yeah, definitely or definitely interested to see how they do the tuning, particularly coming out of raid testing. Mystery has some pretty we'll say broken interactions with certain things. And so it'd be nice to actually see if they like what exactly those are. And then also, I mean, honestly, I'm just excited to see what like the spread counts look like in terms of the like renewing mist and enveloping and stuff like that because I I honestly don't know if like the that sort of clouded focus build we talked about is would even be viable or if you just continue to play
Yeah,
a more standard like, still rising mist but just sort of how you play today is just how you play tomorrow. Um skipping all the covenant abilities and stuff like that. So, um yeah, tuning wise, it's the fun part of the expansion of where we see if they get the numbers actually right. Um
yeah.
I will say it's been interesting too. They finally did this to I think almost every class tree, but they renamed a bunch of abilities, which has been
Yes.
nice.
Oh, that's actually great for
Um,
me. Oh my god, I had
yeah,
to on our analyzer. I had to hack the talent file. We had like two different abilities named Purifying Brew in the same tree, three different like Invoke Neozaos and a bunch of different um like Celestial Brews. Okay. And like if you look at them in
yeah,
game, they make sense because it's like, okay, Purifying Brew, brew rank 2. But that's not part of the name, it's part of the tooltip.
yeah. So how do you pull the rank out there? Yeah,
Yeah. So that got
that's definitely
renamed.
annoying. Yeah, that's good. I'm trying to think if there's anything else big tree wise. I mean, the PTR build, or sorry, yeah, the beta build this week really contained a lot of the PTR updates anyway.
Yeah.
So like they had already announced it. I think we even talked about it last week. But we did, at least for mysteries, did do some fun more testing. I will say that the auras that we get are stacking additively. So leech aura and avoidance aura. So with 5 monks in your raid, that is just plus 20% leech. Uh, which then adds to whatever leech gear you have as a player. Which is fun.
The avoidance is also
So
very good.
yeah, the
Like
avoidance does the exact same stacking. So
like imagine just running around and you just have like your whole raid stacked and it's just a permanent like you have 5 monks, permanent
mhm.
20% avoidance, 20% leech.
Seems pretty okay. So that's gonna they have to change that, or they have to. I don't know. I feel
Yeah,
like
it
that's
just shouldn't stack. Is really what it is.
yeah,
It just shouldn't
yeah,
stack.
yeah.
If they need to make the number bigger, compensate for it not stacking, that's fine. And then it also leads to some like interesting things where if you have like 3 monks in the raid, right? Like one of you
Who takes?
takes leech, one of you takes avoidance, and the other one doesn't take either, or takes one of them because it's a relatively short radius. So like
Mhm.
maybe you still have like two of you take avoidance, so that you have like one of you with one group on a like a Sylvanas or a Kel'Thuzad where you're splitting the raid. And you put one monk in each, and you keep the buff.
Right, right, right. Yeah, yeah. That would be cool. Um, but but yeah, that's just some funniness from the PTR. There's also some other interesting bugs from Mistweaver. So if you're doing any raid testing this week and you're listening to this, you should test this out. In that, if you take uh total or sorry tier of mourning and rapid diffusion, the rapid diffusion procs trigger or the rapid diffusion procs trigger the cooldown reduction from Jade Bond. So essentially, because of that, you can get sub 1 minute invokes, uh, but they're full power invokes. So that it's not like the general shorten reduction. So yeah, that needs to be looked at and probably fixed. I think a lot of it comes down to the fact that most of the proc events, so like with rapid diffusion, when you proc either enveloping, I think it's is that the enveloping one? I always forget these ones, but yeah, any of the proc ones, basically they count as cast events from the
Ah,
monk.
yeah.
So anything that triggers off a cast event of that spell,
Do you remember
yeah.
the innervate Azerite trait tech in early in old year?
Oh no, I don't actually.
So, Holy Priest's Prayer of Ending, I think it was. Every bounce counted as a cast.
Okay.
And Boomkins had this Azerite trait that created the effect for every cast.
Yes, I remember this. Yes, yes, yes.
And so they would just innervate a priest. The priest would then spam whatever AoE spell like generated a cast for every target hit
Yeah,
and give them like 80 stacks of it.
forgot about that.
And then the Boomkin
Yeah,
would be God. Just like the best.
yeah, yeah. I mean, yikes. Yeah, that's a thing. But yeah, that's what's currently happening with some of the mystery abilities. Is that like yeah, with rapid diffusion or even misty peaks when they duplicate or when they actually proc the ability, it's causing actual cast event to occur. So anything that modifies that cast event
Yeah.
also triggers.
Yeah.
Like mastery was triggering on a bunch of things. They fixed that in like the latest build, but like there were certain certain things that just master would also proc on the target, which
I suspect that we are going to see not a lot of like balance or tuning changes this week. Like maybe it's for some really like outlier things like Prot Warrior, but instead we're going to see just a whole lot of it's, it's going to be like a just trying to get things ready to actually test. Get rid of all of the most broken interactions. If a talent straight up doesn't function, that's maybe less likely to get fixed than the ones that
Uh-huh.
have like incredibly overpowered bust interactions, like the judgment bubble thing from action power.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And that sort of aligns with them also starting raid testing and wanting to basically get as clean of a view of what the raids look like with
Yeah,
the classes as they are. So
yeah,
um yeah, that'll give them a ton of information to do that. And I guess speaking a little bit on the we sort of missed this. I missed this in terms of the podcast was a little all over the place today, I feel like.
yeah.
But they also did release the names for all of the tier sets, along with associating them to like their 2 and 4 set bonuses. None of the bonuses exist yet.
Right, they're just
Really, it
spell
was just
numbers.
yeah, just spell numbers, and then also, but they did give us the names of the tier sets and sort of what those things are. And I guess the other thing too about this whole like raid testing starting is they probably want tier sets also done, so we should see tier sets this week.
I
Is sort of
don't,
my
I don't know that that's going to be the case.
okay.
I think that we're gonna get like because if you look back at Sepulcher, first round of testing didn't have tier sets. It was just testing. And the
Okay.
second
All right.
round of testing when we start getting into myth was with tier sets.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Well, then when's the first mythic? And then that's when we know when tier sets are coming. It's like next week, right? It's like the week of October, the first week in October,
Oh
that
yeah,
Friday.
something like
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
Um, that's fair. That is fair. Yeah, I mean, it'll be. I guess. I mean, for those who care, the monk one is called wrappings of the waking fist. Is that what that is?
Yep. Uh,
Um, kind of a cool name.
I like the tier set. How the tier set looks. I've got it pulled up on stream for people watching. It's got some nice spell effects. I have no idea what difficulty this is. What difficulty pulling up?
Probably
Um,
mythic.
Probably it's got enough spell effects for. Um, Never fear those of you that may wonder whether the art team has lost their way. The set also has balls. Um, has in fact 16 balls, so don't worry.
Hell yeah. Love the fact that they have these little like chi balls or whatever healing sphere balls that never actually give us the abilities in PV. It's great. Fucking
Uh,
Blizzard. Blizzard
but
with that stuff.
it's like bandages. It's like this is a very anime monk set.
Yeah.
Uh, this is like your season 5 or with Ichigo running around with bandages all over his body kind of set.
Yeah. Which I think I don't know. I like that. I feel like for Monk, that's a pretty interesting style. I think it
Yeah,
works.
there's a shirt, a couple of shirt models you can get that are this kind of thing, that I've used in some transmogs in the past. One of them is bloody, one of them is not. You can on Wowhead.
Oh,
Um,
interesting.
but the challenge with those is like your shirts. I guess now that you can hide your actual chest piece, you can see the shirt. So it's not as
Right, right,
big of a
right.
deal as it was in like DFA or Legion when it was really annoying to find a chest piece that let you actually see the shirt.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, looks pretty good. The helm is kind of not doing it for me, but you know, uh, maybe somebody wants to be Firebird Man, and that's what the helm looks like to me. So
Yeah, it's true. Well, the helmet, yeah, and they have like it looks a little weird from the side, I feel like too. Like it's got a big old empty tree branch top. Like it's a big old empty orb in the top of your head.
yeah,
With like fire or something coming out. So
like they set your brain on. It's like they took your scalp off, set your brain.
it's true. That is true.
Um,
Um
there's one other set that I
so
wanted to show because I just think it's the Boomkin cosplay set, aka the Hunter tier set, which just like it's got the like feathery shoulders and
I
the
haven't seen this.
bird helm And it's just like the immediate reaction on seeing this is just like you are cosplaying a boomkin on fire. It does
Yeah.
not make you as bulky. Like if you switch to one of the bigger um, race models, it looks a little bit like it. Like switch. Let's try. Like then, like it's a little bit more like an actual boomkin proportions
Mhm.
in scale. Um, but yeah,
Just comically large helm for the hunter
yeah,
set. Um,
yeah,
a little too extra there. So, oh man. Um, I so that was all I had notes wise. I don't know if you had any other. We're very early in this
yeah,
podcast, and there wasn't too much like outside of this that we that I think happened in the last week. I mean, to be completely honest with you, other than raid, I've been really focused on Wrath, like just getting ready.
yeah.
I'm
I'm not
very
even
excited.
playing Wrath, but my week is dominated because of job.
Yeah,
Um, there's one thing from that I think like way off topic from we were jump around,
yeah,
but um, they buffed the Sartharion like being the Drake's alive.
I
So
saw that.
for those that aren't familiar, Sartharion's lair in Wrath is one of the first like optional hard modes where you go in the instance and you kill some trash, and there's three mini bosses, and you can kill them, and that's like the normal version of the boss. But then you can also leave one, two, or all three of them alive, and everyone you leave alive makes the encounter harder because they all come in, and also um, makes the boss drop extra loot.
Yeah,
So getting a three Drake kill is harder but more rewarding than getting a one or two or zero Drake. Catch is that Wrath is comically easy as far as rating goes. So um
yeah.
the like realm first guilds or the people that were going for realm first were all planning on just going in and zerging down three Drake. Like in quest
Yeah.
screens and blues, going in, zerging down the hardest difficulty of Sartharion's lair because it would be faster than going and spending the time to clear the drakes.
Yeah, and it wouldn't be any more difficult, right? Like it would
Right.
be slightly more difficult, but like if you're in that type of progress guild, it's not
Yeah.
shouldn't be too difficult. So,
So they made it so that let me see. I at three drakes, Sartharion gets like 65% extra health.
mhm.
So one of the reasons that they were going to zerg it down is that you would just kill the boss before the drakes really became a threat.
Right. Right.
Um, so the extra health actually does adequately mean that like now you have the other drakes actually show up and you have to deal with it.
Uh-huh.
Um, which of course makes it much more difficult. So we're probably going to see like one or two Drake kills, but it definitely like having this announcement come out on like Thursday kind of
Yeah.
threw a wrench in everyone's plans, including ours for supporting progress on Warcraft logs because like we weren't going to differentiate the three difficulties at all effectively.
Oh, okay.
They were all going to be easy. You would just do three Drake.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, but now there's a need to differentiate them. We were already kind of like doing some ranking stuff to make sure that like DPS ranks for three Drake were higher than strength ranks for like two Drake or one Drake or no Drakes. But
Uh-huh.
now people are asking like, well, what about progress? And it's like we have a week.
Yeah, because raids don't launch until the following reset, right?
Yeah,
Or Thursday or something?
yeah. Wrath comes out tomorrow.
Yep. 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time.
Yep, this podcast will be up and edited by that time. So if you're listening to this, hi, you're enjoying Wrath of the Lich.
Heck yeah.
Um, but speaking of actually, uh, I've heard of a couple. I've heard a couple guilds saying they're like canceling raid this coming week because of Wrath launch.
Yeah, we we are not canceling raid, but we did ask people to post out. Like, it wasn't like, "Hey, we expect you to show up, and, like, if you don't, you're in trouble," or whatever. It was more of just like, "If you're gonna go play Wrath, that's fine, just let us know so we know, like, if we have to
Yeah,
change raid comp."
don't ghost.
Yeah, exactly. Don't ghost, and, like, also don't feel like you have to show up this week, like, go and
Yeah,
play Wrath if that's what you wanna do.
yeah,
Um, and yeah, so, like, we only had one person, I think, so far post out that they're playing.
yeah.
But I made the joke at the end of the raid because somebody was like, "Are we raiding next Tuesday?" And I was like, "No, it's Wrath Day. Like, guys, come on. Like, we have the leveling guild set up. We're get ready to go." And like, the person was there. They're like, "What do you mean leveling guild?" Like, I'm just kidding. And like, then our raid. Then I don't know if it was Argo or Cyrus, but like one of them was like, "Never listen to anything like Anam said." He named off like four people. Like, never listen to these people when we talk about when we're raiding. Yeah.
I mean, those are good instructions. Just never listen to Anomoly.
Yeah, unless I'm calling healing CDs, and then even then you don't really have to listen. We'll figure it
Uh,
out.
One of the perks, again, like I'm gonna this is like a weekly thing now. One of the perks of raiding on the weekend, everybody's gonna get through leveling in Wrath on like Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday time frame,
Yep.
and they'll be done, and they can come raid on Friday.
I feel like every week is another push to like be like weekend rating's the best.
It's
It's like
actually not. It's really annoying. There's all this stuff, and all of it is outweighed by the fact that recruitment is terrible. It is hard to find
yeah,
people.
yeah. It's fun. Like for me, like I would probably agree that probably that because like I think you would get like in my mind you get a lot of people who either are like somewhat. I feel like weekend raiders. This is just my feelings. Like somewhat generally a little bit flakier than like weekday raiders, just because like it's something like you do for fun and maybe you're like, "Ah, I need to miss this week," so it's a little bit tougher to, like, have a consistent group, but I think the other thing too is I feel like a lot of it might be made up of people who, like, already are doing the raid during the week. So it's like, now you get, like, the second time through type people that,
Yeah, there's a bunch of those, and my guild at least generally doesn't take them because what we've found is that they are the flakiest.
yeah, 'cause they're just like, "Oh, listen, all I don't care about this," and then,
Yeah,
like
exactly.
yeah.
But there's a lot of people that like for work schedule reasons can't raid during the week.
No, that's true, yeah.
So there's a lot of that. That's like a lot of the people when they initially joined my guild were joining us because they could not raid Tuesday.
Uh-huh.
Some of them now can, but they're established here, so they generally aren't changing it. But um, the schedule conflict is like number one reason because honestly, like not a lot of people want to give up their Friday and Sunday evenings.
I don't do anything either. Like, Sunday night tonight, go to the grocery store night for me.
Nice.
Real exciting.
Woo! Adult
Yeah.
life.
Yeah. No, but no, I think I mean the wrath stuff just in general, I think is I don't know. I'm kind of excited about it. So I don't know because I know that you said that you started mostly was it like it was private servers and TBC, right?
Yeah,
But did you play like Wrath with any sort of like consistency or like I
I
don't want to say
leveled.
competitively.
I leveled.
Okay, but you didn't like raid or do any of the
No,
heroic
the
stuff.
first time. All right, so not counting Karazhan. It's like Karazhan is
Yeah.
like a big dungeon, not really, right?
Yeah.
Um, the first raid that I actually did in any capacity was Blackwing Descent, and
Okay, the
in
Kata opener, right? Yeah.
yeah, and when I say in any capacity, I mean that during like Firelands, I pugged a few pieces of Blackwing Descent,
Gotcha.
and that
Gotcha.
is like, and then I didn't really set foot in a raid after that until like not counting LFR. I did
Yeah.
LFR actually. Dragon Soul, I did it in Mop in order to get the legendary, and I did it in Wad in order to get the
Gotcha.
and then stopped.
Gotcha. Nice. Yeah. No, Wrath is cool because it's like that 10-25 man split the first time they did that, which was interesting. But then also it's like the optional hard modes that started to come in, which is like the precursor to like the mythic
Yeah,
type raids that we have now,
yeah,
which I think is cool. Like for being old again, like I liked the fact that it wasn't like a menu option to turn it on. It was like an activator for the fight. So like
yeah,
I mean, we talked a little about three drakes, right? Where like if you leave more of the drakes alive, they help during the fight. And I think also the boss gains health too, right?
yeah.
So um that it's sort of like things you control inside of the arena that is this fight that make it harder or easier, right?
Yeah.
Um, Oldawar has like Mimiron's big red button. You press the button, starts, firefighter version of the
XT's
fight.
XT's heart. You kill that and it's
Yeah,
crazy. Yeah.
yeah, he goes crazy. There's other ones too. Even like
I mean, there's
not every
Yogg.
boss, but I mean, Yag had the lights, which I think is iconic too. The Iron Council had the order in which you killed. By the way, that's my favorite version of any hard mode. Is so like the fight is three, whatever stone people, and like the order you kill them in, it like if you do it in one specific order, it's harder versus doing it in another one.
Yeah.
It's actually considered hard mode, and so like you'll get different loot
The
depending on what boss you kill
so,
last. I love that.
some of these bosses like Council of Blood would have been awesome. Like it would have been a neat thing. I mean, no, sorry, Council of Blood would not have been awesome, but Council of Blood would have been better if there were like a reason on farm to go and do like we're gonna do it on hard mode time.
Right, yeah.
And hard mode means doing free to last because free to last is wild. But at the
Yeah,
same
it would've been
time, like with the way that fight was, I feel like they actually would have expected the prog strat to be the hard mode because they just didn't. Like it was a tuning disaster.
yeah. No, agreed. Yeah, they haven't made a council fight that was like that in a while.
A lot of
Because like,
council
yeah,
fights
it's
actually have like a fixed order. Like if you think back to the Boa Council in Battle of Zarlor, like you had a little bit of leeway where there's two bosses active at a time, and you kill one and then the next one comes out, and you got to pick which one you killed at each point, but you couldn't
yeah.
do them in any order. So like there were
Right, right, right.
four bosses that you killed there, but you really only had like three or four different.
Yeah. Yeah, I still remember Paragons of the Calaxy from, what was that? Uh The Black Hand raid, right? Or
Siege of
no,
Orgrimmar.
the Garrosh raid, yeah. Where like the original thought process was when that was coming out was that it was gonna be random order every week. So like each week you fought a different order of the Paragons,
Yeah,
which I thought that would have been a cool way to spice it up. Also terrible for farm.
terrible for
It's like
progression too. Like imagine
that's true.
it's a boss that takes you 2 weeks to do. You progress the first week and then you get to the second week and it's completely different order and overlap of mechanics.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, gosh, you're right. That probably would have been terrible. It would have been interesting, but yeah, terrible in terms of trying to do it. It's
Yeah,
nice that it was fixed. So, but yeah, I mean, Wrath is coming out, and it's funny they've already sent out, or people have already started to ask, like, what's next? Is it Cata Classic, or like, what's going to happen?
yeah,
And which it's such. I think we talked about this last week of like Wrath is really like the inflection point of like
yeah,
Wrath is the final expansion of like the old way of making WoW, and like Kata is the start of the new way of like how they made WoW, right?
yeah,
Which is like Kata is that movement of focus on like all of the game to focus on just end game and like
yeah,
what like pushing you into end game as quickly as possible and making end game really like the part of like what you want to play consistently and like
yeah,
less about the previous stuff. So
yeah.
it'd be interesting to see what they do. Like I would never play Kata Classic from the although I didn't actually play much Kata. Like when it was around.
The weird thing about like Cataclysm, right, is the reason a lot of people play Classic. There's a lot of people that go and do the raids, right? But there's also a
Yeah.
lot of people that just like, the first time around literally never hit level cap.
Right.
And they
Right.
just go back and you can't go and do the old world stuff anymore in original
Right.
vanilla. Like that's a big draw. The BC stuff you can technically still do, but it's way different because everything's just so much easier. But Cataclysm, you can go and do Cataclysm zones right now, and they're very similar to what the
Right.
original experience would have been. Actually, probably a better experience in some cases now because you're not going to reach the end of a zone. They've like out leveled it, which
Right.
was not as bad in Cataclysm. Like you could actually do all of a zone without outlet, or you might be like a green quest, but it's the end of zone
Yeah.
quest, so it still gave good XP, a big weapon up, or something.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, you can't do that with classic at all because zones are gone. With BCU, it's a very different experience, and with Wrath, it's also a fairly different experience going and doing.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, like did they change the talent trees in Cata? That was or
Yes.
that was Mob. Oh
So
yeah,
they
Cata
did
was
the change to the like 6 rows of 3 talent trees that we have
yeah.
now in Mop. In Kata, they changed it so that you had to pick a spec, and then you got a spec tree
Right.
that you picked, and you had to fill that one out first, and then you could put points in the other trees. But you had to like put like 31 points in your main tree before you could.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Yeah, so I mean there was yeah, I don't know. I personally like would never I just wouldn't play a Cata classic. I think the other thing to your point, not only is the world the same as it is now, but the the raids were not the strongest. Right? Like there are highlights of fights, but like most people say like particularly Dragon Soul is the end two bosses are absolutely awful. Like
Yeah,
considered like anticlimactic by all measure of like end bosses.
yeah,
Particularly for someone like I mean, you fight Deathwing. It's like massive dragon. Like it's literally should have been the coolest thing you did, and they made Spine of Deathwing be honestly just annoying and like very tightly tuned, generally unfun for like that part
yeah,
of it. And then, actual Deathwing being much easier than Spine, but then also being like anticlimactic in terms of like you don't really fight Deathwing, you fight his weird
tentacle
army
things.
appendages,
Yeah,
tentacles, and then you punch him in the face for like a burn phase at the end, and like that's it. So
yeah,
yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'm interested to see if what they do here. If like they're like, oh, we're just gonna do this cycle of like
yeah,
classic BC Wrath, and they just restart the cycle now, and now it's like new game plus mode where it's like they
yeah.
take
Well,
Season of the
like
Mastery, but make Season of the Mastery like the real game,
Season of
right?
Mastery was also so like Season of Mastery failed for like right. Some of it is that it released at the same time as TBC Classic,
Yeah, right.
and no, but like if you're given the choice between spending the time in one and spending time in the other, most people are going to pick TBC Classic.
Exactly. Yeah.
Um, so Season of Mastery actually wraps up at the end of this year, and
I
no idea what they're gonna.
I mean I'd say it just dies off, right? Like
Yeah,
I just don't think they have like here's the other thing too is I don't think there's the player base to support classic like regular classic and Season of the Mastery. I just
well,
don't
I would go. I would say I agree with you. I would phrase it a little bit differently. I don't think there's a player base to support Season of Mastery if another classic exists.
yeah.
Like if the other classic exists, Season of Mastery is dead.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's true. So I think I mean maybe they take some of the learnings and incorporate it into like a hey, we're just going to fresh start you and like
Yeah,
wipe Wrath like let Wrath servers live on forever, but like not add new content, not extend it. Like once you get to phase whatever 6, 5, whatever their final phase is, Wrath just
yeah,
stays on. But then the actual content becomes okay. We're gonna go back through this whole cycle again. Only this time, taking Season of the Mastery type things and being like, all right, now the bosses are slightly different, or like, you know what I mean? There's some slight differences in like the way bosses work,
yeah,
or some of the systems around like heroic plus is now a thing in classic, right?
yeah.
Heroics. Yeah. So I mean, I think that's to me because like once you get into kata, it's just the modern game, but like not good. Like with
I've
like
already done
10
my
or
like yeah, I've done
yeah.
my leveling spiel before, and I think that's a for me that's a big part of it. Like I enjoyed Cataclysm the first time through, but Cataclysm leveling zones don't have replay.
Yeah, no.
Um, it's funny because actually, so like Hyjal, Mount Hyjal, was a great leveling zone the first time I did it, and I would never want to do it again.
It's
Like
fair.
I've done it. I've actually done it like 3 or 4 times because I did it
Yeah.
on multiple characters during Cataclysm. But it has no replay value. I do not want to do that zone again. Whereas like I wouldn't mind going and doing like so that's actually my leveling path now when I do new characters is like I go and I do like sometimes I'll do Burning Crusade, sometimes I'll do Wrath.
Yeah.
It's never the Kata zone. It's just not because
Yeah.
I've seen them all. I've done them all. They're all like they're the enjoyment of those zones rests entirely on the newness of them. And so as soon
Right.
as they're no longer new, they're no longer really, at least for me.
Uh-huh.
Um, so it falls back to like those two expansions. I don't like the mist zones for the same reason as the Kata zone. It's like the
S
first time through is good, second time through is okay, and I just don't want to do them. Like I've seen it.
I bad opinion. Some might even say wrong.
I'm
No, I'm
just like
joking.
they're just like a lot of the Kata zones. They're just linear.
Yeah, no, and I agree. I think yeah, I mean, I would say Mists in general just has a special place in my heart. Like
Yeah,
if they were ever to do a classic of a expansion after Wrath, I would want it to be Mist because
yeah.
that's just my favorite expansion
Uh,
just in general.
and I think
Oh,
like that. I wouldn't be surprised to see them do a jump and do like a Mists classic just to kind of do the raids. But I could also see
yeah.
them like doing, hey, we're gonna bring back classic raids as part of Dragonflight. Like do the thing like kind of faded thing. Like hey,
Yeah.
it's Throne of Thunder. It's like
Oh,
it's coming back.
oh, yes.
Yeah,
Give
and
me
that lets them
those
skip the
bangers,
tiers.
dude.
That
Yeah.
lets them skip the tiers that weren't as good. You know, you don't have to do Shaw of Fear. Um,
I don't have 30 minutes to sit in a single boss fight. Awesome. Huge
yeah,
fan.
yeah. Um, and then, but you do get Throne of Thunder and you do get Siege of Orgrimmar, but it doesn't last a year and a half this time. Um, and you get Heimel, and you get, you know, actually all of the
Okay. Yeah, I'd be
like
down. WoD was fine.
all of those raids actually would function reasonably well in modern WoW. It's not like
Yeah.
Nax, where Nax straight up does not work in modern.
Yeah.
Like it would like dungeon bosses are more complex than bosses.
Yeah. Exactly. Exactly.
Um, yeah,
Yeah, no, it would yeah, it'd be I'm excited like yeah, just in general outside of like Dragon I mean Dragonflight I think retail will always be my pull personally. So like I'll
yeah,
always probably lean into like Dragonflight cuz I one of the like the actual guild in Wrath I joined was like the old I used to heal with the old GM. So like the GM of this guild used to be a healer in my retail guild for like years. Like him and I played a really long time together.
yeah,
So like he asked me about like what are you planning to do and I was like honestly probably just like casualed up and like dad raid on the weekends if like stuff's going on, right? Like do some
yeah,
10 mans because I just don't. I thought about like, all right, like, do I really want to raid in a progression guild like 2 nights a week on top of doing Dragonflight, knowing Dragonflight's coming? I'm like, I'm not gonna want to like if I have to
yeah,
choose, I'm gonna play Dragonflight over Wrath, right?
yeah.
Um, and
At
right
least the
now it's
releases
easy.
are staggered a decent bit. Like
Oh yeah,
we're
I should
gonna,
be able to like max out in Wrath and like maybe get a raid or two in and
yeah,
sort of settle in. But yeah,
yeah. Like you could definitely get through 10-man Nax before Dragonflight release.
yeah. Oh, maybe I talked about that. I think his guild's running like a bunch of like they're like a very progression oriented guild. So like I'm assuming they'll have alt runs, maybe I can sneak my way in, pick
Yeah,
up some loot. But no, it's yeah, like I don't know if I'd ever go back. Like other than MOP, I don't think there's any classic expansion that could ever re-release and me be like, all right, I'm done with retail. Like
yeah,
MOP would be the only one where if it's like MOP versus Dragonflight,
yeah,
I'm probably playing MOP. Like,
yeah.
but um,
I
but no,
wouldn't,
it's
but that's
sorry.
just me.
What?
I wouldn't, but that's just me. Like I would want
No,
to
it's
do the
fine.
raids, and I would rather it would actually be preferable for me if they actually were like, "Yo, we're re-releasing Throne of Thunder in retail." Like that's just like our X.5 patch
Yeah.
would be like. That's part of the reason that I do want them to do that is because that would be the best way for me to get to do those raids again and have them be because
Yeah.
once they got through all of the scaling issues from faded raids, that actually has worked fairly well. Like there's some things you don't get to experience the real version of, you know, Denathrius.
Right.
Like you're not killing it at the enraged timer like you would have in the first time through in Castle Nathrius 9.0.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
So there's that, but it's still like good.
It's still a good like you're right. Like you're still experiencing what made that fight fun,
Yeah,
which is really in my mind it's P2 into P3. Like it's the mini bosses in P2 are an interesting way. Like
yeah.
the way the fight moves
The
you around the
whole
arena
dance
is
in phase
cool.
2 and phase 3, yeah.
Yeah. And then yeah, the phase 3 like mirror phase versus non-mirrored phase and like yeah, you still hit you still hit that one point that makes phase 3 so crazy, which is that overlap of, like, literally every ability
Yeah,
within, like, a 5-second window and, like, trying to deal with that, which I think is
yeah,
I mean, that fight is just honestly but it's
amazing.
I mean,
Yeah,
yeah, it's one of the best fights I ever progressed on. So,
is so just as a like a note. So we were talking about like Season of Mastery not having like a population to support it. I
yeah.
pulled up like the number of clears of Nax in Season of Mastery. I'm gonna show this off real.
Gosh.
There's
God.
9 without trash skips.
Oh, Jesus.
So this is like doing all the raid at once. So this is not a dad guild thing.
Yeah.
I don't know how to like. There's no progress for this zone, so I we can't really see any other way. If you look
Yeah.
at with trash skips, there's 30. This is not satisfying all the trash requirements for like speed clear.
Yeah.
But it's also very funny to me. If you look at melee DPS, there's only 3 that show up. It's 66% warrior, fury warrior even,
Yeah.
33% rogue, and 0.8% feral druid. And
So
it's like
funny.
57% mages for ranged, 21% warlocks, 21% hunters, and then there's like 0.3% shadow priests.
That's so funny.
It's
That's
so
so funny. Yeah, I mean, I think that's the yeah.
funny.
Season of the Master just didn't I mean, I think, yeah, I think there's just not a, not like a play not a split player base, not enough classic players, right? Even though classic, I think, is what
Classic is
I mean, you got
huge.
I mean, you guys really
Wrath
yeah,
Classic is going to be like the biggest expansion release
yeah,
since Legion. It's going to be
yeah.
crazy.
Because you guys I
Um,
mean, Warcraft vlogs, you guys release stats in terms of, like, the number of, like, logs that you
we
see,
know
right?
how
Or
many
you can
people
see that.
raid, which is
Yeah.
different than how many people play. But in
But there's, like, a
terms,
correlation, right?
there is, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, and like Classic is big. And Classic also is like has this thing where their content release schedule is so fast that it doesn't really have the dips. Classic didn't have
Yeah.
an 8 month long raid tier.
Right, yeah.
You know, they got Sunwell in like Sunwell came out in May or something, and now the expansion is coming out.
Yeah, so it's not even 6 roughly, yeah, yeah.
And that's for like the last thing in the expansion, right? Black Temple came out in January or like December. And then Sunwell came out in um yeah, it would have come out in January, not I did the tank requirements for Black Temple. I
Yeah,
started in January. Like January or February, and then Sunwell was like May. Like 4 months, if that.
that's crazy, yeah. Yeah, so there's no chance, like yeah, no chance to have actually even see the turn like, the turn down or, like,
Yeah.
the less one player, so
And like it declines over the course of the expansion. It always does. And especially like
right.
we have seen a downturn in players over the longer Sunwell patch. Like Sunwell has been a longer patch than the other phases of um, Burning Crusade.
Mhm.
But it's still less time between release of Sunwell and release of Wrath than between release of Sepulcher and release of Dragonflight.
Right, yeah.
Or even
Yeah,
release of like Sanctum and release of Sepulcher.
that's true, that's true.
So yeah.
It is what it is, I guess. Fortunately, Season of the Mastery, failure, I'd say. I guess that's a harsh way of
That's a
calling
harsh
it.
way of saying it. It
It
has
would just
not
was
been
not as
successful
popular.
though.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah, but I think
yeah.
sorry.
It I mean, I'm not a classic player, so I can only speculate as to reasons. I think the
Yeah. I would agree. I think if they had baked Season of the Mastery into Burning Crusade, as in, like, you had the changes to the bosses eventually, right?
I don't
Maybe that would have
know.
extended the
I'm not sure.
yeah, yeah, maybe
Because
you're
like
right.
there's this thing where I feel like the classic player base actually just doesn't want the bosses to be hard. And it's not because
That's fair.
like the first, and some of it is like the first tier of or the first phase of Season of Mastery. They did actually add mechanics. Bosses got like the normal to heroic level bump in mechanics.
Right. Yeah.
Um, but after that, they really didn't do boss specific stuff. Like AQ did not get boss specific mechanics. Nax did not get boss specific mechanics. Um, I don't think Blackwing Lair might have.
Yeah.
So it's I don't know. They also like world buffs. I like them, and they're gone.
Yeah.
So, but they're also not the thing in TBC in the first. World buffs in TBC are not really a thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And they're even less of a thing. Well, they made that big change to world buffs too, going into TBC. So
Yeah,
um, but yeah. Well, cool. Well, I think we have extended our time into
yeah.
we made it our 90 minutes. I guess sorry for the weird episode. I mean, to be fair, there wasn't a
This is
ton
kind of a
of stuff
grab
that
bag.
happened.
Like we're gonna have a ton to
Yeah.
talk about next week because we're gonna have raid testing, right? We're
Yeah.
gonna
It'll
have
be fun.
tons of raid testing stuff to talk about. Um, Fingers crossed we'll get like an actual like pre-patch date. That would be,
Hey, if that leak holds true, it's still November 28th.
which would be the end of next rotation.
Right.
Um, maybe we still have to pick up our Denathria skill.
I think we have ours. To be fair, I'm missing the back half of Sepulcher, like Lahuvum onward. I have
Yeah,
not killed on Fated, so I think
I
that was they did all that when I was on. I
we're
was
we're
taking a
not
timeout.
so we're not gonna be able to get everybody portals because if there's only one more rotation and the portals go away with pre-patch
Yeah,
and pre-patch comes out at the end of November or end of October, then
yeah.
um we're not gonna be able to get everybody portals because we only are going to have one Denathrius.
But the port, so the you'll get well. You have at least two more chances, right? Because the portals were something they said aren't going away in
Oh,
pre-patch.
did they clarify that? I
Yeah,
couldn't.
yeah, yeah.
I
It's
didn't think the portals were on there.
well, they said
The mounts
generally
aren't.
the raid
Yeah.
achievements seem to be staying. So
Okay.
like the raid stuff seemed to be staying. It was like the
Yeah.
mythic plus seasonal and PvP seasonal stuff was ending at the end of when
Yeah.
pre-patch
I
hit.
mean,
So
I am hopeful that that will be the case because that will mean and that like if you remember Shadowlands pre-patch and UFA pre-patch, that was all like generally easier. Like they nerfed the
yeah,
raids to make it so you could just clear them.
exactly.
Um,
Maybe they turn on Fated all the time everywhere, and then you just get to pick and choose which bosses you kill. So you could
yeah. Maybe
that would
they
be
make
cool
all the
actually.
bosses like passive for the pre-patch, so you can just like walk to the all the doors are unlocked and you just like wave to paint past him.
No,
You
not
like
doing
walk up
that.
to Anduin and you just like wave and go past him to go to the other mounts.
God, I wish. Just put a portal right next to the entrance like they did in BF or in
For for BOD, which
yeah
BOD
for
BOD didn't have a skip at all for a little bit of history. Like BOD did not have a skip at all,
sure.
but doing Jaina mount runs was like a huge thing. Whether you were selling them or just getting them for your guild, like it was a big thing.
Yeah,
And so having to clear the whole raid every time was just
awful.
uh they added a skip. It took you
Yeah,
directly to Jaina.
it's a huge
Very
help.
nice. It
Yes,
made
it
it
was a
like a
huge help.
15-minute run because you like did you even have to kill Champions of Light? I remember being like there's the
Mm,
trash to Champions of Light and then
no, it was right to the
yeah,
ready entrance. So you just
yeah,
clicked it, and
and
it
you just
puts
went
you
to
in.
Jaina.
Yeah, put you on the boat with
It
Jaina.
it
Yeah,
meant that you didn't have to do the trash between Champions of Light and Grong or the trash before Mechatork or the trash
right.
between Mechatork and the boat boss. All of which was long and
Well, we would just death run the trash after the first boss. Like that
yeah,
was our thing, and just get rezzed in front of
yeah,
the that what is that gorilla boss. So
Grong.
Grong, yeah.
Yeah. Anyway,
Oh man.
we're even more off topic somehow. That is going to be it for the show today. Thank you all for watching and or listening. And if you enjoyed this podcast and the other work that we do over at the Peak of Serenity, you can do that over on our Patreon. at patreon.com/Peak of Serenity. And of course, come and join the Discord. It's not F1 day. F1 Lounge is not going to live up to its name. They're going to be talking about real things like World of Warcraft. Imagine that.
Yeah. Last weekend though. Next weekend, F1's back.
Anyway, thank you all for listening, and we will see you next week.
Bye.